All right, here's productivity graphs of Company A and Company B. Productivity on the left hand, the x-axis, over time on the y-axis. The red line represents the minimum level of acceptable performance. You're in charge of Company A. Productivity has been falling and it drops below minimum level of acceptable performance. What do? Some of you may think, well, we need to have a meeting, talk about the possible causes, blah, blah, blah. No, you're too warm and fuzzy. You need to KBTN. Now, what's KBTN? Kick butt and take names. Performance goes up immediately, but it doesn't stay there. It starts to drop off again. You wait until it gets down here, go out and kick butt again. Performance goes up, but not as high. Why is that? Well, they've played this game. In other words, people are starting to learn that the minimum level of acceptable performance leads to you yelling and screaming, and when you yell and scream, all they got to do is keep out of trouble. So you're basically teaching people the minimum level of acceptable performance, and that's the productivity graph you can expect. If your only way of motivating people is to yell at people, you can expect minimum level of acceptable performance. Now let's look at Company B. Same scenario though. They're struggling with productivity as well. Drops below the line, what do? You may be thinking it's time for a different approach. No, KBTN. Why? Because unacceptable is still unacceptable. You need to go out and you need to kick butt and take names. In other words, say this is unacceptable. What are we going to do about it now? And when you say that, performance goes up. But this is the big difference between Company A and Company B. Company B doesn't use punishment as the only means of motivation. It realizes productivity has gone up, so it steps in and gives appreciation and recognition for people for improving performance. In fact, there's a lot of patting on the back and things like that. When performance is recognized and appreciated, it tends to stay at a higher level. So productivity continues to grow. Now, it may eventually level out, and when it levels out, it's at a much higher level than the productivity in Company A. Now, let's just give you a scenario. Let's say Company B has been cruising along, and all of a sudden it just has a little bit of a dip in productivity. What do you do now? Well, I'll tell you one thing. You certainly don't do a kick butt, take names. That's inappropriate. You simply step in and say, hey, what happened last week? Productivity slipped a little bit. Can I help? Is there something I can do to make it easier for you to achieve your productivity goals? In other words, I step in and act as kind of a servant leader and see if I can help out in some way. Productivity increases. Again, I step in and recognize and appreciate the performance. And by the way, sincere appreciation for doing good work. And when that's sincere, productivity continues to grow over time. Now, you may think I've just been displaying a little fantasy up here, but the reality is the performance graphs I drew for you are the performance graphs of union versus non-union motor carriers in the United States post-deregulation. When the trucking industry was deregulated several years ago, this is the performance graph that organizations had. Non-union organizations, represented by Company B, had a 30% productivity advantage on a 20% lower wage and benefit cost. Significant advantage in the marketplace for non-union carriers competing with union carriers. By the way, union carriers tended to treat people like dirt, yelling and screaming at people, being very negative when it came to ways to correct behavior and so on, and they got a lot of this minimum level of acceptable performance. Non-union carriers not only were more positive with their associates, but more importantly, they listened to their associates, and listening is one of the best ways to keep a union from forming. If you want a union, all you got to do is stop listening to people, and sure enough, you'll get one. Anyway, that's enough thoughts on that. Have a great day.